Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. On the podcast with us today is Joe Trodden. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Dan.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking to you, Joe, and I want you to get our listeners started and give us a little bit of a brief background about you and where you are in this entrepreneur space.
So I wasted a huge chunk of life doing IT projects after sort of coming out of uni, doing a couple of things there, law degree. Yeah, so then having had a moment of epiphany, started working with mindsets, and I've basically been working with entrepreneurs for the last 5 years exclusively. I've been a coach for about 8 years, but I've really fascinated with entrepreneurs because they just do stuff. You know, you can see things happening every day, which is really exciting. So the people that I work with specifically are the guys that have got through that chaos of the initial startup, who are just doing stuff and seeing what sticks. And then it's about really putting a proper structure and strategy around it and preparing your mindset to go up to that entrepreneurial leader level.
So as you've gone through this journey as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you've probably faced tough decisions, which is, you know, every entrepreneur, if they've been an entrepreneur for at least a day, they've had some tough decisions to make. So I want you to kind of get us started, because obviously the show is called the Tough Decisions Show for Entrepreneurs. And what we try to do is try to dive into a lot of tough decisions that we make as entrepreneurs and business owners, and, you know, really kind of, you know, let other people learn from those tough decisions. So the first one I like to get started with is one that I call the sore thumb tough decision. So it's a tough decision that you had to make in business. You made the decision, but it ended up not having a very good outcome. But you did learn a lot of lessons through that. So I wanted you to, you know, kind of share with us what that tough decision was and some of those lessons that you learned.
So I had a first business when I came into entrepreneurship. I set a business up. It was a social enterprise, and which is I don't know if you have the equivalent in America, but it's basically a business with social aims. So it was designed to help young people find employment as well. But I just didn't run it. I ran it like a charity, you know, because we got some funding, and then it just became about chasing funding. And the tough decision, I guess, was to, in some ways tough, in some ways it was just absolutely the right thing, just to leave that behind, because, you know, it just wasn't doing anything for me. There's some decisions like, you know, leaving stable employment and going into entrepreneurship with a limited cash runway and thinking, will I have enough rent money to cover these bills and so on. Because I live alone and I don't have any dependents. You know, I've always just felt I could take those kinds of chances. So I think, do you know what's a weird paradox, I think, Dan, is sometimes the tough decisions are the ones that you put off taking. You know, the ones that you leave for too long, that you should have just taken, you know, whatever that time frame was, 6 months ago, you know, a month ago, a week ago, whatever it is, because it's the angst that hangs over not making a tough decision.
I have a lot of questions after that tough decision, because obviously there's multiple layers to that tough decision that you described. Because, you know, first off, you have that tough decision, like you just mentioned there a minute ago, of, you know, you made the tough decision to go ahead and exit that, but you should have made that decision earlier. And so that was the tough decision of, you know, exiting, but knowing that, you know, you should have done it earlier.
Yeah.
And there's also the tough decision earlier on of, you know, what were some of the decisions that you made along the way? You mentioned something earlier about you had decided, or you had, you know, not run it as a nonprofit. And so what was it in that area right there that were some lessons that you might have learned that maybe in the future you could try to mitigate that issue?
It was lying to myself about the commercial viability of that, and really trying to run it in that way. I think taking that easy safety net of going for that funding. And look, you know, the funding was there. I was set up to help young people, you know, and they weren't paying for it. But it really should have, the aim was to go for the self-sustainability. And I don't think at that point, I mean, God knows what is that, like 7, 8 years ago? You know, it's just, like not making that decision. It was just problematic, like hanging on for too long and putting it off because maybe I just didn't want to face up to the reality of that.
So was this more of kind of like a passion that kind of was pushing you through, that you thought you were hoping that it was going to make it, and you just, you know, had already gotten so far down the road, you're like, maybe it's just because you always hear, you know, that people sometimes close their businesses down a month or two shy of when they're going to really have that hockey stick.
I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case here. Yeah, I'd say it was run with, it was definitely passion led, and I think that's a lesson for people as well. There's always that conflicting advice about like follow your passion, and then another thing will tell you, oh well, don't set up a business related to your passion because it'll blind you. You just get to do what you feel is right. It was right at the time, and lessons were learned from that, and there's absolutely no regret around it. So it was a good experience, but far more interested. That's why I started moving around and doing different things, because it's actually the commercial businesses I feel that are going to make the biggest change. Charities are great, but they deal with an externality. So if you want to fix the system, people have to do good business. And the entrepreneurs that I work with are all great people, that are spreading out their ethos and their positivity to the people that are around them as well. And I think that's what makes the big impact, rather than the externality that I was trying to deal with.
So I hear, and I'm sure you probably do, several different, business ideas and pitches and stuff like that. And sometimes, I have to, sit down and tell somebody that, like what you just mentioned, that's a charity, and you don't want to, charities are good, but you have to go into it knowing that it's a charity, that it's something that, because there's certain things that I do that lose money, but I know it's because I'm doing it for a different reason. It's a different cause, right? So I'm expecting to lose money on something, right? Because it is a charity, but you have to really make yourself, I understand that it will be a charity, and, you won't be able to make a lot of money with it, but if that's what you want to do, just go into it knowing that. And so, I think that's one of the hardest things to tell a passionate entrepreneur about a huge business idea that they think that they have. And at the end of the day, when you're looking at it from a business perspective, and you just know it's not viable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it can be a dangerous sort of middle ground there, where people are like so proud of you for, following your passion. And when you start it, it's really exciting. But you just got to look at the numbers. What's the reality of those numbers? What is that actually going to turn into? How big is this market? Who cares as much as you do? As long as you're willing to look at those things, like you say, and be honest about what it is that you're actually doing. There are people that have got lifestyle businesses where they slog away, but actually this is what they want to do. But that's what it's going to be. It just doesn't have that growth to go up to the next stage. And I think as long as they've got people around them that can be honest with them and be realistic about the expectations, and that's totally cool. Not everybody should have some massive multinational conglomerate, but it's about the realism around that.
So let's shift here a little bit and talk about a different tough decision that you had to make as an entrepreneur that had a really good and positive outcome, and some of the lessons you learned through that one.
Well, I mean, it's not. It wasn't really. I guess it's hard because it's. See, when you say like I know it's Tough Decisions podcast, like a tough decision of leaving employment is risky. This is like the second time. So after that first business, I went and worked for an amazing company called Entrepreneurial Spark, a business accelerator working with entrepreneurs. And then I left that about just over a year ago to work on my own. It's a tough space because there's a lot of sort of free support out for entrepreneurs, or there's a lot of coaching and so on. So I had to make sure that I've got a differentiator. If you look at that externally, it could look like a tough decision, but it was just an amazing decision. I'll tell you what is a tough decision. So the way that I work with my guys is that they have to commit to doing something which we regard as a bold action every month. So in principle, I don't subscribe to this thing of like you can work 16-hour days every day and every day can be a home run. I've never seen it happen other than somebody in a video on YouTube or something. Like that just isn't the reality I've experienced. But you should be able to do like a real 10x and move the needle big time every month. So we commit to like a really scary action. We call it bold action. So there was one time that somebody didn't do it and I let them stay. And as soon as I made that decision, I regretted it. And I've never done it again because nobody wins from that. And I knew when I was making that, like 2 minutes after it, I was like, that's the wrong decision because it just sends out the wrong message. The others that are in the group then think, well, do we not need to sort of push ourselves to that level? That's one actually that I regret. But the lesson from that was you have to be true to what you believe in and the principles that you've set, regardless of how you feel in that moment. because underlying I knew what the right decision was, and I took the easy way out at that point. And I can assure you, Dan, I will never do that again.
Well, and I think that, one of the things that a lot of people think about in that risk piece of it, because earlier on, I mean, you touched on multiple things during that piece, but I think the earlier on thing that you said is taking that risk of stepping out of your job and doing what you're doing now and kind of starting your own thing. And, when you were doing that, because I know a lot of the listeners are kind of in that position where, they might be, considering doing it, or maybe they've already done it. And there might be some different things that they could do. But,
sure.
There's some people that are listening that, are in that corporate America job or, working that 9 to 5 and they're wanting to do something different and go out on their own. What were some things that you did, not necessarily from a mindset standpoint? I like actions more than mindset stuff, but
sure.
What were some things that you did from a preparation standpoint, if you will, to make sure you were prepared and ready, or at least, you were mitigating some of the downside risk before you stepped out? Or did you just go straight out cold turkey to just quit?
Straight out cold turkey. So the first instance, the thing I wanted to set up, I was working for a large UK charity at the time, and I said, I've got this idea. And they said, oh, well, we've got tight funding streams, which is fair enough. Their funding's sort of ring fence for things. So I just says, cool. I met a guy at an event. He said, I can get you half the money. And I just went, cool, let's do it. So he gave us a bit of a runway. And I guess it's the same going out for myself again. There was a bit of a cash runway out there to do it. The difference to the first one is I had no idea who the customer really was. The young people I was helping, yes, they were the customer, but not the customer for the commercial side, which was a store that sold creative stuff, which actually I have absolutely no interest in, which is a strange thing to set up. It was more about the young people. But yeah, for the second time, just have the cash runway. But listen, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. When you say that, mindset, I almost got a sense of take it or leave it. It is mindset that's going to make the difference as to whether you make it. Yes, it's about understanding. You've got to have a customer. You've got to be able to solve their problem. Look at lean startup stuff. The methodologies that are out there. If you're in that job, you're thinking about setting up a business, there are a million resources about lean startup. Just go and look at what that is. But you have to prepare yourself for the fact that you are going to face real doubt. Even when things are actually working, you would face real doubt and fear. And that's what I think you've got to prepare yourself for. I do think that understanding what Carl Jung, a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, calls the shadow self, so this is this negativity, it's like the inner critic on steroids, that is definitely going to attack you. And then you'll have all these other areas of doubt. You'll have some people back you, some people try and tear you down because they're jealous of what you're doing, but it's all bubbling away inside them. So you've got to have real self-awareness, full-on confidence and authenticity, which is very, very hard to maintain in the entrepreneurial world, and just awareness that the shadow self is going to jump out and attack you. It's done it to every entrepreneur I've met. So I do think that it's about the mindset and preparing yourself, but you've got to have something that is going to stack up on the numbers, or just don't do it. Don't make the jump unless the numbers are realistic.
Can you share with us some strategies that you'd like to do when you're facing a tough decision?
I think there is a lot to be said for, you have to trust yourself at times. Your brain does have, connections. I'm not saying you should always just, hey, I'll just instantly go with my gut. But you should trust yourself more often than not, and that there aren't that many right and wrong decisions. There's not as many as people think there are. There are just more. It's more about just make the decision. You've got to just take the action and move forward. There's a thing, Guy Alan Watts, bit of a sort of hippie philosopher guy, but he made this really great point about whether you choose to believe in yourself and trust in yourself or not, your life is still going to roll on. So that, you might as well have that extra bit of confidence, because if something goes wrong, and I'm sure, I don't know what your life's been like, but, things have certainly gone wrong in mine, but here I am, and it doesn't stop me from doing the next thing. So there's very few catastrophic things. If you can make it a data-driven decision, great, but the paradox there is that you can always be looking for the next data point. There's always another bit of information that you could gather. So when it comes to making those decisions, do think about, I'd listened to one of the other podcasts, the guy was talking about the worst possible outcome, so that post-mortem technique from Gary Klein. That is interesting, where you just put yourself round the table like the worst thing has just happened. How did we get here? What actually caused this to happen along the way? But I think my key message around that is do what is authentically right for you. Get the data, try and make the decisions through that, but do what's authentically right.
We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to be going over a series of quick questions and answers that we call the Trifecta from Joe Trodden. So stay tuned.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HandfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HandfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HandfordCapital.com.
And we are back with a series of quick questions and answers that we call the Trifecta. And Joe, I want you to get us started and talk to us about your favorite technology that you use in business that helps make your life easier every day.
It's so basic. I think this is what's coming up all the time. But it is Calendly. If you're not using something like Calendly for your Outlook appointments, then you are insane, my friends. Like, it just saves so much time. So, I would have to say that. It's a quick and easy one, but it's fundamentally awesome.
And what's a favorite quote that you've used that has helped you as an entrepreneur?
So there's a really great quote from a guy, Charles the Boss, about the important thing is to be able at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. I just think that's an unbelievable, that's a great mindset to have. And if that is your mantra, you can achieve unbelievable things.
And what's a favorite book that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
Do you know there was a really great paper from these guys at an organization called ALNAP, and it was about how humanitarian aid organizations make their decisions. Because I was looking at decisions in uncertainty, and if anyone's got to make decisions on uncertainty, it's those guys. So I recommend they can get it from the website. Your listeners, ALNAP, Humanitarian Aid Decision Making, great paper.
So what's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
The next thing in my vision is to keep building this community that I'm building. It's great to put those guys together when we strip away and they can just have those honest conversations about what's really going on in their minds, when they can share, because they're cross-sectoral, and they can share insights from different sectors, so nobody goes too tunnel vision or down the rabbit hole on their industry norms. So it's about building those up. I'm really interested in entrepreneurial meritocracy. That's what I'm interested in.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to be here with us today and sharing some of your insights. How can the listeners reach you if they want to continue to follow you some more or reach out to you for some questions?
So the website is mindsetexperts.co.uk, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. There's a load of my videos on there. And by all means, get in touch. I'd love to hear from your listeners. The guys that I am specifically geared to work towards, like I say, is the guys who are already in the market, probably just leaving that solopreneur stage, maybe got a small team, are really looking for that growth at the scale-up stage. So get the strategy sorted out and get your entrepreneurial leadership sorted out.
Well, Joe, thank you so much again for taking some of your time here. Looking forward to continuing to follow you as you grow as an entrepreneur, and looking forward to having you on a future episode as well.
I really appreciate that. It's been great talking to you, Dan.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.